In a kingdom encircled by misty mountains and dense forests, life thrived under the rule of a wise king. But even the most peaceful lands have their shadows. Among them was Kael, a warrior celebrated for his unmatched skill and unyielding courage. Kael was not just a soldier, he was a symbol of justice. His name was spoken with reverence, and his presence inspired hope. People believed he was invincible, but fate had a cruel twist awaiting him. One fateful night, under the silver glow of the moon, Kael and his army faced an ambush. Among the attackers was someone Kael trusted, a comrade he had fought beside for years. The betrayal struck deep, not just in his body, but in his soul. His friend, driven by greed and a secret allegiance to the enemy, plunged a blade into Kael's back. Left for dead, Kael was found barely alive by a hermit who nursed him back to health. But the wound had taken more than his strength. It had stolen his voice, leaving him mute. Kael's heart ached with guilt and shame. He had failed to protect his men, his people, and the honor he held dear. Haunted by nightmares of that night, he chose silence as penance. Wandering from one desolate place to another, he became a ghost of his former self. Years passed. One day, Kael's path led him to a village nestled in the valley of the Forgotten Plains. Its streets, once lively with the chatter of merchants and children's laughter, were now silent and deserted. Kael noticed boarded-up windows, crumbling walls, and shadows that darted away at his approach. Fear clung to the air like an unseen fog. As he walked through the village, a faint, trembling voice broke the silence. "Mister, please." Turning, Kael saw a young girl named Lila. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, and she clutched a piece of stale bread. She held it out to him, her hands trembling. "They'll come back tonight," she whispered. "Please, save us." Kael knelt, his gray eyes meeting hers. He gestured for her to explain. Through sobs, Lila told him of Drex. Drex, a cruel warlord, had taken over the fortress in the mountains. He raided the village regularly, enslaving the men, stealing food, and demanding to know the location of a powerful relic rumored to be hidden nearby. Kael clenched his fists. His heart ached for the villagers, yet self-doubt gripped him. He was no longer the warrior he once was. How could he face Drex and his army? Lila placed her tiny hand on his scarred one. "You're strong. I know you are." Her words cut through his self-doubt. For the first time in years, Kael felt a flicker of purpose ignite within him. That evening, Kael walked through the village, observing the frightened faces of its people. They huddled in their homes, too scared to light fires or speak above a whisper. Their fear mirrored the guilt Kael had carried for years. He knew he couldn't erase his past, but he could choose to act now. In the town square, Kael gathered the villagers. With gestures and expressions, he communicated his plan. At first, they hesitated. What could farmers and weavers do against Drex's trained warriors? But Kael's determination was unshakable, and they began to trust him. Kael taught them to fight, not with weapons they didn't have, but with their hearts and minds. He showed them how to use their tools as weapons, how to build traps from simple materials, and how to defend themselves as a united force. Lila became his shadow, watching his every move. Despite her age, she learned quickly, her spirit fierce and unyielding. Kael saw in her the strength he had once believed was lost in himself. On the night of the attack, the village stood ready. The air was thick with tension as Drex and his men descended from the mountains, their torches casting an ominous glow. Kael took his place at the front, his sword gleaming in the moonlight. Behind him stood the villagers, their makeshift weapons clutched tightly. They were scared, but they were no longer helpless. The battle began. Drex's men surged forward, confident in their strength. But the villagers fought with a desperate courage that caught them off guard. Traps sprung, disabling their advance. Farmers wielded scythes and hammers with surprising skill. Kael moved like a shadow, silent but deadly. His every strike was precise, his every move a testament to his training. When Drex stepped onto the battlefield, his cruel eyes fixed on Kael.
"You think you can stand against me?"
Drex sneered.
"You're a broken man, a shadow of who you once were."
Kael said nothing. His silence unnerved Drex, who lashed out with a ferocity born of arrogance. Kael dodged and parried, his movements fluid and controlled. With a final calculated strike, Kael disarmed Drex and brought him to his knees. The villagers cheered as Drex's men fled. The warlord's reign of terror was over. As dawn broke, the valley echoed with the sounds of celebration. The villagers, once broken and afraid, now stood tall. They had reclaimed their strength and their hope. Lila ran to Kael, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "You saved us," she said, hugging him tightly. Kael knelt and handed her his sword. Though he couldn't speak, the gesture said everything. The sword was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of resilience and courage. Kael couldn't stay. He had more roads to walk, more battles to fight within himself. But as he walked away, the cheers of the villagers followed him. Kael's journey reminds us that redemption is not about erasing the past, but embracing the present. Even in our silence, our actions can speak volumes. The greatest strength lies in rising, no matter how far we've fallen. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and tell me how you're bringing hope into your own life, no matter the obstacles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to MGS Stories. My name is Sunny Raman, and here we bring wisdom to fuel your modern-day journey. Remember, the strongest voice is the one that rises after silence.